Welcome to Fake Love and Flying Monkeys, the podcast where fake love is exposed. I'm Nova Gibson and I am your host. I'm the principal counsellor at Brighter Outlook Narcissistic Abuse Counselling.com.au. This space is dedicated to helping you reclaim your worth and understand the impact of toxic relationships with suspected narcissists. You deserve clarity, healing, and freedom from the pain of fake love and flying monkeys. So please leave a review and grab a copy of my book, Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. Let's uncover the truth and take back your power. Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. Have you ever tried to explain narcissistic abuse to someone and felt like you were speaking some foreign language? Well, if you have, you are not alone. In fact, this is one of the most painful realities, I believe, for victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse, because no one seems to get it. Not your family, not your friends. Unfortunately, not even some very well-meaning therapists. And this just adds another layer of trauma to your already devastating experience with your abuser. So in this episode, we are going to be getting really honest about why it is so hard for victims of narcissistic abuse to articulate the extent of what they have been through and why it has had such a traumatic impact on them, and why no one seems to understand narcissistic abuse. Well, the first major reason that I'm going to be talking about in relation to why it is so hard for you to explain to others what you have endured is that narcissistic abuse, which goes hand in hand with coercive control, is invisible. People can't see your injuries because they are all on the inside. The wounds to your emotional health, your mental health, the emotional scars, the scars to your soul, these type of psychological wounds aren't visible to others. And because these people that you're trying to explain your trauma to can't see any bruises or broken bones to validate that you've been abused, then this type of abuse often gets minimized or dismissed by others. And isn't that what your abuser did to you? Very well-meaning people, which often are the people who love us the most, will say things like, "Are you sure you're not overreacting? But they seem so nice." Gosh, everyone has a fight every now and then. So what they're doing to a victim who already doesn't trust themselves, they don't trust their instincts, and they've been conditioned to believe that they're always overreacting. And what these types of comments do to a victim is make them believe that their abuser was right. So what we have to remember is that narcissists are masters of image control. Everything is about maintaining their reputation and looking and appearing good to other people. They're actors, they're chameleons. They change depending on what situation they find themselves in or whom they're talking to. And they will put out there this public image of someone who's charming and generous and even admired, but you know differently, because what goes on behind closed doors is nothing like the image that everyone else sees. So because the narcissist wears this mask for everyone else, and it's only you who sees the person behind the mask, then these people are going to believe what they're seeing and what they're hearing. So it's really hard for them to reconcile your words with the image and the personality of the person that is so good to them. How does it feel when you finally work up the courage to seek support from the people you think will be there for you and obviously want to be there for you? How does it feel when they say things like, but they've always been so good to me, or "Oh, I just can't believe they do that"? And it certainly does not help the trauma bonded victim when they hear statements like, well, if it was that bad, why didn't you leave? Or why do you keep leaving and going back to them if it's that bad? But trauma bonding is powerful. It's the same strategy or mechanism that keeps people trapped in cults and hostage situations. So unless someone gets this type of dynamic, then they are really going to struggle to understand why you stayed so long or why you keep going back and trying to fix things and thinking things will change. Now, another reason that makes it so difficult for victims to describe narcissistic abuse is because it is often so covert and subtle, and there's not always this one big thing that is obvious to others, let alone the victim. And it's about these incidents that wouldn't seem like a big deal to another person or even to the victim themselves if they were an isolated incident. But the damage comes in the fact that they are ongoing, consistent patterns of behavior over space and time. And all of these little things, which really aren't little at all, seek to dismantle your personality and, of course, change you into someone who is dependent on their abuser, someone who has no self-worth, no self-esteem, and is unable to leave that toxic roller coaster of major lows and perceived highs, which is what creates that powerful addiction, attachment, trauma bond to the narcissist. But you know how destructive their gaslighting was because of the ongoing intentional nature of it, which caused you to not trust yourself and to not believe anything you're seeing or hearing. And of course, to turn to the very person who distorted your reality in the first place, which is the narcissist, for what your reality actually is. Gaslighting does incredible damage to a person's mental health, their ability to trust their instincts, and of course, causes them to second guess themselves all the time. It's virtually impossible to get across to someone else just how frightening, how emotionally traumatizing it can be when, for instance, the narcissist rolls their eyes at you, or they come out of the bedroom and they slam their coffee cup down in the sink because these other individuals haven't been on the other end of the ongoing punishments that you receive, the silent treatment, etc. They don't know what that slamming down of the coffee cup in the sink means and what you're going to cop when you hear the sound of that cup smashing in the sink. That other person doesn't know that through your experience and the ongoing coercive control, they don't know that when you see the narcissist roll their eyes at you, that this is an example of them telling you that, or implying that you're pathetic and that they're absolutely never going to validate your experience, or they just couldn't care less about whatever you're saying to them, and that eye roll was just to really dig the boot in to make you feel worthless on top of all the other little things they do to make you feel worthless. That other person hasn't been conditioned to survive the abusive relationship, to walk on eggshells 24 hours a day in survival mode, always hyper vigilant to danger. So they don't know that eye roll from the narcissist is a trigger for you that causes your heart to start beating faster and to be even more hypervigilant around what they're going to do and how you're going to protect yourself. So to someone who has not ever lived through this type of abuse, these things on their own sound really small and petty. But when they happen daily over months or years, they erode away your self-esteem and your reality. And it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And this is what narcissistic abuse victims endure. As a narcissistic abuse victim, you've also been conditioned to minimize your own abuse. Survivors of narcissistic abuse so often struggle to validate their own feelings because they've been gaslighted, they've been blamed, they've been told that they're the problem for so long that even they hesitate to call it abuse. So when they finally do open up about it, it often comes out as kind of soft or unsure or maybe even apologetic. Sometimes they preface what they're saying to the person in front of them by protecting the abuser or making the abuse not as bad as it is, downplaying it. They might start off by saying something like, look, maybe I'm overreacting and they did this, but I don't know if they really meant what they were doing, but this is what's happening to me at the moment. And this is so common for victims of domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, because there's that subconscious belief that they're really not thinking out loud around the fact that they'll probably go back to this person and they don't want everyone else to hate them. And another big thing is that society just doesn't understand emotional abuse yet. And it's really hard to get the support you need to not just recognize this as abuse, but to be able to leave and to stay away from this abuser whom you are trauma bonded to. Coercive control often starts under the guise of caring. I want to help you shop for your clothes. I want to pick you up from work all the time because I love you so much. But there's that slippery slope into complete control where you can't do anything without getting their permission first or being punished if you make a decision without checking in with them. And it's only when it becomes all consuming and suffocating that you feel something is off. But it still doesn't feel like abuse to you. Physical abuse, that's easy for people to label as wrong. You can see it with your own eyes. But emotional abuse, people still think that these issues are relationship, little rough patches, or just a personality clash that everyone has in their relationships every now and then. And I just want to make it clear, guys, that narcissistic abuse, that type of psychological, emotional warfare on its own is damaging, but it certainly can be partnered with physical abuse. And when it starts off in an emotionally damaging environment, this is the perfect pathway for the abuse to escalate into physical abuse. My personal belief is that all domestic violence involves narcissistic abuse and coercive control, but not all domestic violence entails physical abuse. And this is where victims need the most support to understand what they're going through, especially if there is no physical abuse. They've been conditioned to downplay what they're experiencing, and they can't even define what is happening to them as abuse. And let's not forget the narcissist's favorite weapon, the classic smear campaign. Imagine you're finally pouring your heart out about what's been happening to you. And these people have already received a very different version from your abuser with just a little seed of truth in there, perhaps about an argument the narcissist started where you engaged in reactive abuse. So here you are pouring your heart out to this person and trying to articulate what's gone on for you, and they're hearing what the narcissist told them you would say. So you're met with these looks that are kind of reflecting to you that they either don't get it or they're not believing a word you say. So the reality is that most people do not know or understand how this type of complex abuse really works. Most people think that abuse looks one way: physical violence, screaming matches, obvious cruelty, and they have no idea about complex abuse dynamics like gaslighting, covert sabotage, financial control, isolation, and the intermittent reinforcement schedule the narcissist uses. And let's not underestimate the shame that narcissistic abuse victims carry. They feel embarrassed a lot of the time that they didn't see the red flags, or that they stayed, or that they told you that they were leaving. Maybe they even got your help to leave and then they went back. They feel ashamed, and this will shut down any conversation. So what can you do when no one seems to understand? Well, what I always say to that is you've got to talk to the right people. Talking to someone, even if it's a well-meaning individual, and that person doesn't get it, they're going to minimize your trauma just like your abuser did. So find the right people. Look in private support groups online. There is no better support than someone who can go, me too, because they've been there, they've done that, they've got the t-shirt, and they understand implicitly what you have been through. Keep educating yourself, guys. The more you understand trauma bonding, gaslighting, and all of the narcissistic abuse tactics, then the more confident you'll feel in your own truth. Knowledge is power, even if others don't validate it. It's so important to get support. On your own, you are just too vulnerable for that narcissist to come and hook you back into another cycle of abuse when they hoover you back to regain control of you. Seek out trauma-informed support. Look for those therapists or counselors like myself who specialize in narcissistic abuse recovery. Some therapy is not always better than no therapy, because the wrong therapist will have you writing letters to the narcissist telling them about how much they've hurt you, which, as we know now, simply rewards them and tells them that, hey, you did an A-grade job. Please remember, you are not crazy and you are not alone. Millions of people worldwide grapple with exactly the same thing in trying to make others understand their pain. Your pain is real, even if others don't get it. And that's what I want you to hold on to. Just because someone else doesn't understand your abuse does not mean it didn't happen. Do not compare it to anyone else's trauma. Your trauma is valid to you, and it is no less traumatic for you than the trauma of someone else is valid to them. You will never get universal validation for your trauma in order to heal, but you don't need it. You need self-validation, safe spaces, and the right people in your corner. Narcissistic abuse, coercive control is designed to be invisible, confusing, isolating, but your recovery does not have to be. You can step out of that fog where you can get perspective on what actually happened to you, even if others are still trapped in their misunderstandings. Keep going, guys. Keep healing. And remember, just because they don't get it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that you're ahead of them on the path to truth. You got this. I believe in you. And that brings us to the end of another Fake Love and Flying Monkeys episode. Guys, it is so important to talk about what happened to you in the beginning, but it's got to be with the right people who will allow you to talk about the same thing as many times as you want to, because every time you talk about one certain thing, it's like watching a movie over and over again and just picking up some tiny new detail that you missed the last time. When you talk about it, you are validating your trauma. Now, if you would like one-on-one support in your narcissistic abuse recovery, please just see my website link in the description and email me about booking an individual counseling session. I would love to support you in a Zoom online session in your healing journey. Now, if you would like to support the channel, guys, please leave a rating and a review wherever you can. You have no idea how much that helps. And of course, share so others can benefit from this information. On that note, guys, it's bye from me for now. Until tomorrow's episode, please remember, you are worthy of love, and you are certainly worthy of a whole lot more than a lifetime of fake love and flying monkeys.